You've probably come across what I call knowledge collectors. These are people that think they're being productive by learning more information and jumping to new shiny objects. And you might even be one yourself, but nobody seems to ask the question, why are they acting in this way? So many people can relate to knowing exactly what they need to do, but just not being able to follow through with it consistently. Calling it a lack of discipline discounts a massive part of the puzzle, and the true cause then slips under the radar. So your state of being or self-image is everything. But another way, this is how you identify, and it's the wellspring from which all your thoughts and beliefs arise. Trying to change your habits and behaviour without firstly addressing the underlying assumptions that you have about yourself will be temporary, frustrating, and can backslide you actually even further below your baseline. In order to make the changes stick, you must face your own shortcomings head on, then vow to die to that old self and be reborn as somebody new. Now, this stuff's very fashionable nowadays. Self-improvement online is just a huge area. But I find, especially in the mainstream space, one of the major lacking components is actual actionable things that people can do day to day. A lot of this stuff is based upon just motivation, which is a finite resource, kind of getting yourself all hyped up. And that's good to kind of get you started, and it's important, it's part of the puzzle, but it's not what's going to bring real change and lasting change. So in this video, I'm going to provide a framework of something that you can do, a process we're going to go through together, and then you'll have something that you can implement every single day in order to create a new reality for yourself. So the first thing that we need to address is your self-image, your state of being, or your identity. So these words all basically mean the same thing, and I'm going to use them interchangeably in this video. If you don't firstly address that self-image, then any changes that you try to implement on top of that are not going to stick, because they're going to clash with your current identity. This is one of the reasons that I'm quite hesitant to just give out tactical information all the time, especially in my coaching calls with clients. And I can always tell within about 10 seconds of talking to somebody if they're the kind of person that's even going to be able to make those actions applicable in the first place. So what I always like to do instead is take a step back and focus upon that foundational part first, how they currently see themselves, before adding any tactical stuff on top of it. And this is another one of the problems with the mainstream self-improvement stuff and those motivational videos, because they assume that the person watching them is already in the state of being to make those actions applicable, when overwhelmingly that's not the case, because the very fact that you're seeking that information means you're not that type of person already. On a broader sort of spiritual level, where you could say that we're not really anything, we're just a collection of thoughts, beliefs and perceptions, a result of our programming that has shaped us into the people we are. The truth is that reality is malleable and can be changed, but this is just something that is not understood in society at all. Society's model is that you are not in control of your life, there's no autonomy over your life, and if something bad happens to you, there's just no solution provided. You only have to look at things like soap operas and those lowest common denominator shows that are aimed at the average Joe and stuff to see this in action. I mean, you can see the disempowerment and victimhood on the characters' faces within seconds of watching it. Everything's always an argument about how somebody did them wrong or why they can't be happy because of somebody else. This is why I'm quite adverse to all of the whole mental health stuff in society now. You know how everybody's talking about this stuff, and I think it's good that we're speaking about this, and you know, we're all sharing that we are dealing with things in our own way. It's more the approach or the lack of approach that's taken afterwards that I'm not very happy with, and that's because in society, you know, depression, anxiety and things like that, they're viewed as almost like the weather, and it's something that just changes and comes upon you and you have no control over it. One minute it's sunny, then it rains, and now you're depressed. Good luck. That just creates a state of disempowerment in the person suffering with it. But our emotions are there to tell us something is out of alignment with how we're living. They're not just these things that are there to harm us and assault us, and I think that's the paradigm that's been perpetuated in society. So when you get sick, for instance, and you get a fever, the fever itself is not the illness. That's how society views negative emotions, is the depression is the problem. No, the depression is a symptom of something else underlying. And the very fact we even have those negative emotions in the first place, it means there's something else that we can be striving towards and we can become. Without that other side, you wouldn't even know you were dissatisfied. The reason I think this is society's view of this stuff, though, is no accident, because everything in society is constructed to make you feel like you have no control of your life and you're a victim and you should just kind of be happy with what you've got, basically. If you think that I'm being paranoid and conspiratorial in saying that statement, then you should just turn this video off now, and I don't know how to help you, because turn on the TV for 5 minutes and you'll see that perpetuated everywhere. It's victimhood, fear, don't believe in yourself, like you should be scared of everything, like you could be attacked at any minute and things like that. And so of course, you know, things like depression and anxiety are then going to fall under that belief system and be viewed as something that is here just to attack you like everything else, and you should feel scared and threatened with no real solution provided. And I think it's created this neurosis that's has done way more harm than good. So that dissatisfaction that you feel is actually a creative state, and what it's supposed to be is to kick us into gear and be the catalyst to then move towards change and improving ourselves. So now I've had my kind of rant out of my system there, we'll go back to making an example out of this. So if you think about a fat guy, right, his desire might be to lose weight and improve his body. So you would say this is his sort of current state. This is his starting point, where he is. I want you to really contemplate and think deeply on this next thing that I'm going to say, because in my opinion, this is probably the biggest sticking point that people on this self-improvement journey fall victim to. And that's that they are unconsciously viewing that dissatisfaction state and allowing that to create a negative feedback loop that just perpetuates the undesirable self-image. You cannot take cues of how to think and behave and feel from what you see in front of you. You must think greater than that, because what you see in front of you is just old news anyway. It's as a result of things and the way you've thought in the past, and that's what you've created now. As soon as you change that, the sooner that you can change the results that reflect back to you. The fat guy again, for instance, he sees himself as a fat guy, and what does a fat guy do? Well, he eats terrible food, he doesn't work out, and he has a poor self-image. So you could say in that regard, he's actually very successful at being a fat guy. The actions that he does perfectly reflect that current self-image. The reality that you wish to move towards, the person that is able to achieve that reality isn't the person that you are now. The person you are now isn't capable of achieving that reality, and that's why you must change. So instead of constantly banging the drum of that dissatisfactory reality and then perpetuating that state and getting more of the same, the correct response instead is to use that as the genesis point for change to occur. And the way we're going to do this is by firstly taking a very, very honest look at how we're currently being, a really kind of no holds barred look at how we are. And some of this might be quite difficult for you, you know, to really look at yourself and admit to yourself that you've not been living up to who you know you can be. But you've got to think, the sooner I face it, the sooner I can actually begin to address it properly. So the first thing that I want you to do is take out a journal, and I want you to write what are your consistent good habits and what are your strengths. For me, for instance, it might be things like I go training consistently, I eat well, I like to read about self-improvement, I meditate, I sleep pretty good, things like that. Next, I want you to write down what are your consistent bad habits and what are your weaknesses. For me, some of these might be procrastinating, I would say poor time management, these types of things, consistent bad habits and weaknesses. After that, you're going to write down what are your character traits, both positive and negative. This might be you always try to follow through on the things that you said you were going to do, on your actions, on your promises. And a negative one might be that you avoid challenge or hardship. Next thing, I want you to write down the general assumptions that you make about yourself. It might be something like, I never do well in exams, I'm not good with money. You know, these things really feel like truths to us. So those are the general assumptions that you make about yourself. Next, I want you to write about your current worldview. So how you think the world works in your reality. People disrespect me, you know, all women are mean and reject me, or something like that. Next, write down what are your worries and fears. So for me personally, something that I have had as quite a continual sort of fear, I guess, is this fear of not being able to, or not achieving the potential that I know is within me. And that's something that I fear. So write down your worries and fears. What do you value in life? So it could be your family, friends, relationships, fitness, health. And finally, I want you to describe your current self in one sentence. So if you've done that now, we should have a really clear view, and we've brought awareness to how we're currently behaving and who we currently are. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this as our sort of orientation point to then build on top of and be the catalyst for that change. Now what I want you to do is write down a few paragraphs about something you'd like to achieve, and it doesn't have to be a physical goal either. It can be more like a state of being change. It can be how you want to feel. Why do you want to do this thing? How would it make you feel? Why do you want this? And really dig into that. Keep asking why. Why do I want this? Why do I want this? I would suggest just keeping this to one category for now, so we're more focused upon that point. So it could be, I want to be shredded with a six-pack and have peak athletic performance. All right, so now what we need to do is we're going to answer those same questions, but from the perspective of the person who achieves that goal that you want easily. And don't be discouraged by how far this ideal seems from who you currently are and who you're currently being. What I would suggest for this is, if you're struggling to picture this, think about somebody that you admire. So like a character, it can be real or fictional, and think about how they behave, think about their habits and things like that. And now we're going to answer those questions again. So what is this ideal version's good habits and strengths? It can be that they meditate, you know, they're consistent with what they say they're going to do, they go to the gym regularly, sleep well, eat well. Now the next category, which is what are the general assumptions that this ideal person makes about themselves, is probably the most important one, because the underlying assumptions we have about ourselves are what form our self-image. So really have a think about this one. So it could be things like, He loves to eat healthy. He sees himself as a healthy person. He believes he can overcome his weaknesses with introspection and effort. He knows that he can achieve whatever he wants with the right knowledge and consistency. Next is going to be, how does this ideal version view the world and how it works? This could be things like, when I meet people, they're always friendly and want to get to know me. You've got to think like, if I saw the world in this ideal way, what would make my life so much more pleasant and easy? And the reason this is so important is because what we think of the world and the way we see the world works will be reflected back to us. So this is why two people can experience the same thing but have a completely different opinion of it, or even a totally different description of how something happened. Like, our minds are that powerful. Don't hesitate with picturing a perfect outcome or how you would like the world to be, and think about that. The last two questions are, what does this ideal version value in life? Could be looking after his family, his friends, relationship, fitness, health. And lastly, describe this ideal version in one sentence. So now we have that ideal version defined, the person that is able to achieve what you want without even really thinking about it. The process is now to gradually grow into and become that person. And we do that through consistently saturating our mind with the idea of this person. So in doing this, you're engaging what's called the reticular activating system, which is essentially a filtering mechanism of our mind that allows us to identify things that we've decided are important to us. In this case though, it's also going to act as a way for us to catch ourselves when we begin to fall off track. There's something really special about when you select a goal. It's almost like you write a contract with yourself. So to illustrate with an example, using myself again for this, when people used to ask me about this channel, I would always say something like, yeah, I have a YouTube channel and I create some content and stuff. But that statement, you can already tell it comes from the premise of like not very serious, like it's like maybe just a bit of a hobby and you kind of do some content. And that was how I was actually acting before, until I started becoming more consistent with publishing these videos. And when people ask me about it now, I just say, yeah, I'm a YouTuber and I have an online business. What does a person who is what I am becoming do? Is they make content consistently. They treat it seriously. They treat it like a job. Even though it's still early stages for me and I consider this channel quite small and I want big things for it, I must begin acting that way now or I'm never going to get to that result in the future. So we need to saturate our mind with the idea of this character, and I would suggest creating some kind of like a PDF where you sort of list the character traits and maybe write a few paragraphs describing this person as well, and you can add some pictures in as well, things that represent this ideal version. Read it in the morning and before you go to bed, because those are times when our subconscious mind is very susceptible to programming, so you want to take advantage of that and look at that document then. Another process I would suggest for this is to visualize yourself as this new person for 10 minutes a day. And I'm not going to go into it too much in this video, but if you want some more info, check out the book Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz for more details. What I want to talk about now is some of the pitfalls that you can find when you start to do this, because although this is a positive thing we're doing, there are some negatives to it as well that are going to come as a result of that change. And again, I think this is something that a lot of the mainstream self-help stuff just doesn't address at all. It's all about positivity, fluffy rainbows and stuff like that. But I think it's super important to have realistic expectations, because I see so many people that get started on the right track, but then maybe have a slip up or engage in some bad habits again, and then fall off track because of that. So they don't see results quick enough, or they think that everything's over because they've had a relapse or something. But this is part of the process. You are going to slip up, you're going to go wrong. That's part of becoming somebody else. Now, you've probably heard me speak about the ego in different videos, right? And the ego is sort of your false self that's built up from programming. Because it's identified with your current way of being, it's going to resist this change. And so it might almost feel that as you begin to move forward and progress, that you feel even worse than before for a time. And this is entirely normal. This is actually a positive thing. So don't freak out about that. Really, it's just a smoke screen and a fear response of the ego. Now, the way that you will experience this, though, is not so much as fear that's right in your face. It is a fear response of the ego, but it's way too intelligent to be so upfront about that. You remember I've spoken about how it uses like creativity and deception in order to get you to buy into it. Because the ego's bought into your current character, it wants to keep you as you are. What better mechanism than to try and influence you to do the bad habits more, because they're associated with your current way of being. The thing is that ultimately, right, you have free will to choose. So all the ego can do is try and influence you. Even if you feel super anxious because of the, you know, like urge, that dopamine rush to go and do the bad habit, you still choose to do it at the end of the day. All the ego can do is influence. It's kind of like in mythology, like a vampire. If it's going to bite somebody, it can't just impose its will on them and bite them. It has to be like invited in through coercion. That's why it will seduce the person that it wants to bite. Urges will pass if you just sit with them long enough and bring awareness to them. But even if you do succumb to them, don't be hard on yourself. As I mentioned before, this is a part of recovering from something and getting better. Relapse is a part of recovery. Something happens once you've sort of decided this is going to be your new way of being. Like I said before, once you select a goal, you automatically bring a greater level of awareness to your current habits. So it's impossible to lose consciousness. Consciousness only raises. You might slip back into being the old person again, but you never forget the lessons that you've learned. If you do experience any super overwhelming urges, you know, like high anxiety and energy within your body where you just feel like you're driven to do something, just stop in that moment and bring awareness to what's happening. The ego in that moment is trying to influence you to do the bad habit. Even if eventually you do succumb and relapse into the bad habit, go into it knowing that this is not really what I want to do, because eventually like you're going to get a cognitive dissonance within your mind where that realization that this isn't what you actually want is going to become stronger than the urge to do the bad habit, and it will just, at that point, it's just illogical that you would do it. This is a vastly different mindset than just blindly being pulled along by life and following urges and having no idea why. The fact that you shone the light of awareness onto that situation weakens the ego's power over time, because the ego can only operate in darkness and with deception. The only thing that you need to pay attention to and believe is in that new version that you're becoming. Disregard anything else that tries to tell you you're not capable of it, that it's, you know, it tries to influence you off that track, because again, that's just another tactic to keep you exactly where you are. So in order to recap this video, guys, what you need to do is change your self-image, because building any new habits on top of a defunct self-image is only going to result in frustration and failure. And we do that by taking in a very honest assessment of how we're currently being and our bad habits, and we realize that this person is simply incapable of achieving the things I want and I have to become somebody else. And then we have a think about how the person who achieves the things that we want to do does them, and does them easily as well. So what are his habits and things like that, and then we slowly have to grow into that character through saturating our mind with it, thinking and trying our best to behave as that person, realizing that resistance is going to come. It's the current self trying to sort of stay alive, if that makes sense. And we just have to bring awareness to that and realize it's not the end of the world if we do slip up. So I really hope you enjoyed this video, guys. If you'd like to do any coaching with me and we can address this stuff personally in much more detail in a kind of personalized approach, then you can book in the link below. I've done this with quite a few different people now and they've said it's been a really powerful experience. So if that's something you'd be interested in, you can book below. And I will see you in the next video, guys. Thank you.